Okay, so welcome back to the full cup of coffee with Kelly and my three wonderful, courageous, and beautiful guests that are here with me today to talk a little deeper about the about May 17th, the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia. We at Thames Valley have made a decision to honor the day on May 15th, which is today, which is the day that this will air. And because we wanted to honor it, and May 17th happens to fall on a weekend. So, which is why we're honoring it on May 15th. And we are raising the flag at our main board office today in order to honor it. We would typically be raising the flag at our school, and unfortunately, under the circumstances of school closures, that's pretty tricky. So we are doing our best in honoring it by raising the flag at the board office. So thank you, Cam and Matt and Julie, again, for being here with me, and so appreciative of your presence here today and your willingness to be courageous and vulnerable. I first wanted to sort of start off by just acknowledging and recognizing and setting a bit of a context and a frame for the rest of our conversation around the relationship, the really close relationship between mental health and well-being and equity or inequity. So Patrick Case, who's done a lot of equity work for the province in education, actually said this quote of, it's actually really difficult to talk about well-being without talking about inequity because they're so well connected. The ways in which our social environment, we live in our social environment, and some of the inequities that are experienced by marginalized populations have a direct impact on people's mental health and well-being. So I'm really inviting people that are watching this to think about that as we go forward. Consider this. So consider the social determinants of mental health. So the three social determinants of mental health, the three most significant are: 1, freedom from discrimination and violence; 2, social inclusion, like a sense of belonging or connectedness; and 3, access to economic resources. So those are the three most significant social determinants of mental health. And that will make a lot of sense as we continue to talk about my guests' experiences. So with all of that being said, I'm interested if we could continue to sort of build on what we already started to talk about in the sip of coffee around talking about the rights that have been given, but also the inequities that still exist. And I'm wondering if sort of Matt, maybe you might feel comfortable starting and just kind of talking about some of those things that people that are watching may not have a full appreciation of, in terms of all of the things that you need to consider for yourself when you go out into the world, that on a daily basis, that may not sort of land on people if they're not sort of somebody who has a LGBTQ plus identity. So what are the things that you need to consider?
Well, I have a pretty good example. When I first got to high school in grade 9, I immediately went to my guidance counselor and told her that I wasn't comfortable taking gym class, just because like my school didn't have a gender neutral change room or anything. So it would have been I had to go change with the boys or the girls, and I just wasn't comfortable with either at that point. So I went to my guidance counselor and told her that I wasn't comfortable taking gym class. And she was a great resource. She got me into GSA, and she worked around my schedule to help me be more comfortable with what I had to take. But for a lot of cisgender heterosexual students, that wouldn't even be a factor in whether or not they wanted to take gym. Like, it would just be like, oh, I'm taking gym. So that was a pretty big one for me, just because gym is mandatory in high school. So that was a really big one for me.
Big. And you had a positive sort of response or a positive experience of somebody who understood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so, Cam, what would you say are the things that you sort of need to consider on a daily basis that not everybody does?
I feel like I just, when I leave the house, I have to think about like, what area am I gonna be in today? Like, who am I gonna be with, and stuff like that. As I identify as a gay man, my partner, I hold his hand when we leave the house. So we have to think about if we're safe enough to do that. And then at school, it's the same kind of deal. It's like we have to watch our backs when we're in the hallways. We have to think about what kind of, like, what doors we leave out of when we go to the bus stop. Like, certain things like that most students wouldn't have to think about. Like, you just leave to go home. You just go out any door that you're nearby. You don't have to walk across the whole school so that you can leave closer to the bus stop so that it's a shorter walk. You know what I mean? I feel like things like that really make me think about it sometimes, and I'm like, I don't even notice it that I have to think about that subconsciously sometimes. I'm like, oh, those are things I have to do. But on top of that, I feel like school is just like using the washrooms and change rooms like in gym class and stuff like that, as Matt said, is kind of an overwhelming thing for students who are identify as trans under that umbrella, because it's a big question as if you want to be in there or not, and if they're going to let you in there or not. And you have a lot of pressure on you from adults and other students, etc. So
just something as I'm going to use the word simple because many people would see it that way. Something as simple as being able to use the washroom or the change room. There's so much consideration and thought about your personal safety that certainly that needs to go into that, and about your comfort level and who's going to say something and who's not going to say something. Yeah. And some of those considerations, like you said, have almost like you don't always even notice that you're having to think about it anymore. Yeah.
The more I talk about it, the more I realize that I actually have to do those things. It's not like every day when I think about them, I'm actively realizing that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. And you mentioned that when you're out with your boyfriend, for example, you have to be very careful about sort of where am I out in public, because where I am, my safety needs to come into consideration based on where I am and whether or not I can hold his hand or not. Yeah.
Because you never know what's going to happen. And I've had experiences too where you just have to be careful because you never know how somebody's going to act towards you, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, it really comes down to that basic sense of physical safety in the world. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. I don't know, Julie, was there anything that you would like to add to that?
I guess like just as a gay woman, I'm basically coming out every day, whether I want to or not. So it's as simple as I'm with my wife in a store and the store clerk comes over and asks if we're sisters, which we get a lot. And so then it's like, no, actually we're wives. So then, and there's the whole coming out piece there. When we're planning any type of travel, we have to look at the queer friendliness of the resort or the hotel that we're staying at, even the city that we might be traveling to. If we're going to the southern United States, in some states, we might not want to hold hands, or go to certain countries where it might be illegal to be gay. So we have to do some additional research just to ensure our own safety, so that we're not putting ourselves in a harmful situation that a lot of heterosexual people might not have to. They don't realize that we have to do that, but that's just part of who we are and what we do every day.
And when you describe it, like you almost describe it like we just have to do some additional research, and that just lands on me as how like significant it's like not just additional research. It's like it's huge in terms of what you have to consider versus me as a cisgendered woman, a straight woman would need to consider, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that part just kind of just comes with the territory, I guess.
Yeah. And when you say that you get asked if you're sisters, what the first thing that comes to my mind is I I have never been in a position to justify my relationship with my husband in a store, in a grocery store. Never have I been asked if he's my brother, ever.
Yeah.
And yet it's something that you have to justify, and like you said, you have to come out like almost daily. Yeah.
Exactly. And then there's other things where people assume that I'm married to a man. So like, oh, what's your husband do? Or what's your boyfriend do? I will receive, like, I know my wife has sent me like a gift to the school before, and people have been like, oh, who's the nice man that sent you those? And I'm like, my girlfriend, not a man at all. So it's just those assumptions that make me actually super uncomfortable, because it's like, okay, yeah, here comes a lesson in education, and now I'm making the other person feel uncomfortable. Instead, they actually made me uncomfortable, but now I'm making them feel super awkward. So it then just turns into a really awkward situation.
And yet so like, for all of you, thank you for sharing all of those examples, because it's so important for those of us who have, quite frankly, the privilege of not having to think about these things. It is so important for people to hear about all of these things that you still have to do in order to just kind of go about your life and exist in the world. So thank you for sharing that. I'm actually interested in talking a little bit more. There will be a lot of educators, administrators who will tune in and watch this. And we, in thinking about education in the context of sort of schools and education, and the key role that schools play in promoting inclusivity and supporting our LGBTQ plus students. So Cam and Matt, you both have such amazing and brave and courageous stories behind both of you. And I'm interested in hearing about your school experiences. I know that's a big, it's a big topic. But maybe Matt, if you could speak to sort of the sort of even the big things and the small things that really have made a difference, like a positive difference for you throughout your school experience. Yeah.
For me, grade 8 wasn't all that amazing. I had a teacher who didn't really teach us about a lot of LGBTQ plus topics. So once I got to high school, my eyes were really open, because it's a lot more like accepted in high school, I would say, from my experience. One thing that I've really liked that I found a couple teachers at my school have done is when they give the student information sheets, they say preferred name, not just name. And they ask your preferred pronouns, just because a lot of kids who may identify as transgender can't change their name in the system or legally, because their parents might not be okay, or they're not ready to come out at home. So I found that to be really, really helpful. And it just kind of, in the back of my head, it let me know that teacher was going to be a little bit more accepting, and I could go to them as like a trusting person.
So like on the actual physical form,
yeah,
it says not just name, preferred name and preferred pronouns.
Yep.
Yeah, like that's a small in the world of creating a form.
Yeah.
But massive and huge in terms of the meaning it has for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And Kim, like, have there been sort of things that have made a really big difference for you, big things or small things, that anybody in school have done for you that have been really helpful?
I feel like I came out in the middle of 8th grade. So for me, I was still going to elementary school, which was a big thing for me, because the elementary school that I went to, I'd gone to my whole life. So it's like I knew everybody there, everybody knew who I was. Like, it was kind of like I felt even more pressured in a way, because everyone was going to notice that things were going to change, I feel like. So that was a lot for me to handle. But when I was coming out, I was able to come out to my grade 8 teacher, and he was really, really supportive in helping me with like my journey and of trying to figure out myself and figure out how to come out to my to my peers and to the rest of the students and staff not only on the floor, but in most of the school, because like I said, a lot of the teachers had like watched me grow up. So it's like kind of hard for me to avoid it in the hallway and stuff like that. So having a teacher that like really understood not only my situation, but like looked into more of what he could do for me and like what he could help me with when I was transitioning throughout elementary school, because he didn't know if I was like allowed to use the washrooms, because everyone that was at our school was telling me I couldn't play in the sports team. I wasn't allowed in the boys' bathroom. So there was experiences where it felt like I had nobody on my side, and he was the one person that was trying to still figure out, like, can he use the washrooms? Like, can he do this? Can he do that? And he was actually like putting more effort into it. And even just little things like having somebody to just use your right pronouns and involve you in class and make you feel like you like that you have that support is just one of the biggest things, because I feel like even the littlest thing someone can say can make someone's life change so quick.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for LGBTQ students.
Yeah. Yeah, it really speaks to the role of a teacher in the life of a child, and you know how it's never to be underestimated. What a difference. I mean, you will probably be talking about this teacher for the rest of your life, probably. Yeah, in terms of somebody who made, yeah. And you made a conscious choice, it sounds like, to choose him to come out to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I did. He was one of the people that made me feel like I was safe to begin with. And if I didn't have that in the first place, I don't know, I would have made my way through the rest of elementary school.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did he help? And I'm asking these questions because there's going to be elementary educators watching, there's going to be secondary educators watching, and this may be really helpful to them. How did he help your peers? How did he advocate for you and help your peers to kind of understand?
During mental health and learning about gender identity and stuff when you're in 8th grade, you know how most schools have the mental health curriculum, and we went to do that and talk about gender identity, and he came up to me and asked me and was like, I know that you are going to have a hard time like trying to figure out like things. And I was like, yes, I am. Mm-hmm. And I asked him to help me, and he helped me come up with the idea of introducing my new pronouns and my preferred name in front of the class, because our grade 8 class was like one big health class. So in front of the class, I'm just saying like, this is who he is now. Like, you guys just kind of have to accept it, whether you like it or not. Like, because we watched a video on another trans boy in class that day, and then after that he had the conversation with my class. And although some of my peers may not have agreed with what was going on or known how to deal with it, there was a lot more people than not who were still standing by my side after that, and that was pretty uplifting to have him make me feel like I didn't have to talk to every person individually, because that's a big thought on people's brains when they come in.
It is. That's it. So it's a big thought on people's brains when they come out, that they have to come out one person at a time, or
like rather than any gossip or something like that. Like, that was a big thought in my brain when I first came out, because of the way that things played out. I didn't want it to seem like that.
Yeah. I saw Julie, I saw your face kind of when I just said that. You went, oh my gosh, yes. Like, it's almost like overwhelming comes to my mind, and I don't know, obviously, but that's what comes to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So tell me about the role of, or the importance of GSAs in schools, because what I do understand is that's how you all know each other, first of all, because there's a connection between the three of you. So Matt or Cam, either of you, what has GSAs in schools meant to you in your sort of journey?
I think that they're vital. Like when I was in grade 9, I was looking for people who I could identify with, finding people who were going through kind of the same things as me. So I think that going to something like that, like having a safe space where I know I could go there and just be myself and nobody would care. I feel like that is just so important, especially for a lot of grade 9s who may have gone to a school where there wasn't a lot of education surrounding LGBTQ plus topics, and there's a lot of education that goes on within GSAs. So I think that for a lot of kids who are not only just figuring themselves out, but trying to find others who they can identify with, it's super important and can really influence how people address the situation and their education on it.
Yeah, what do you think, Kim?
I feel the same. I think that they're vital. I feel like every school that is in TVDSB should have a GSA because, like Matt said, every GSA that I've participated in, they do talk about a lot of topics, not only like LGBTQ in the media, about events, history. Like you learn a lot about it as like an LGBTQ person, and even if you aren't an LGBTQ person, it's a good place to learn about it if you're an ally or have somebody in your life who is. And it does make the kids feel like they can have a safe space to go and meet new friends and do what they please, because there's a lot of kids who don't know everybody in their school, who aren't easy at speaking to people. Like it's not easy for them to talk to people. So being in a smaller like place like that, that's like more filtered for people that are more like them, is like a very like good environment, and it's very like uplifting and like heartwarming, especially when you're young and don't know what's going on. So
yeah, so that brings me right back to when we initially started this, is, you know, one of those social determinants of mental health is a sense of belonging or connectedness. So when you feel like you belong somewhere, when you feel like you're connected to people that are like you, or just like socially connected and feel included, that has an impact on your sense of well-being, for sure. I mean, you just talked about that. So Julie, I'm wondering if you can speak as somebody who has sort of led GSA in the past. I wonder if you can speak to that a bit.
Well, the GSAs I find vary from school to school depending on the student population. And I always say that a GSA size doesn't matter. I think the whole board would look at Beale's GSA and would get super jealous because they had 60 kids every week who were coming, and others were like, how do I get more kids out? I only have 8. Well, size of the GSA doesn't matter. What's important is that you're actually offering a space, a safe space for students who need the GSA. It's not a case of them having to come. It's kids who need it. So one week a student might need the GSA, but the next week they don't. And so you can't base the success of your group on who is going to show up every week, because I know a number of students who identify somewhere on the LGBT spectrum who don't need the GSA. And that's what you want. You want to get to the point where the students don't need the GSA anymore because they feel included in other spaces in the school. But you do need to provide that space for students to have that social inclusion in order to improve their mental health and well-being, as you stated at the beginning. And that is why GSAs are so important, because it helps with our students' mental health, and it also increases and betters our school community and makes our school better as a whole.
So we know that that's a huge role that schools can play in creating that sort of environment of inclusivity and social inclusion. We know that, I mean, nothing comes better from except hearing it from Cam and Matt around, you know, students in our system that are sort of talking about what helps, what has helped you. That's really powerful. And sort of the flip side of that is sometimes I think it's important to also talk about here's what hasn't always been overly helpful to me, and what we can do to be better. What can we do to be better for folks like you, Matt and Cam? How can we do better? What hasn't been helpful, and how can we do better? What would you say?
I would say with pronouns, if a person identifies as trans, they know at some point in their transition they're going to get misgendered. It's a fact. It's going to happen. I find that if it does happen, I want to move on. Like I just want the person to be like, oh, like, and just switch. I find that people feel really bad if they do it, just because there's a lot of sensitivity around the topic. So they'll be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. And they just make it a really big deal, which kind of just makes it awkward for everybody. Then I feel like I have to validate their feelings for them misgendering me, which like I shouldn't have to do really. But it's much easier for if someone makes a mistake, just if they say she, just correct yourself, say he, and just move along with the sentence. It just makes things so much less awkward for everybody and takes a lot of the strain off of the conversation that you're having with that person.
So what's meaningful to you is somebody correcting themselves first and foremost. That's important. But just like you don't need huge apologies and for it to be made a big deal. Just correct yourself and move on, or else you feel responsible to be able to sort of make that person feel better about their mistake.
Yeah, like if I misgender a cisgender friend, if I call one of my friends she by accident, nobody's gonna think anything about it. It's just I'll be like, oh wow, that was not the smartest, so I'll just correct myself, and it's not a big deal. Like we laugh about it, so I don't understand why there's so much. Like I do understand, but I feel like if we treated it the same as we treat cisgender people, if someone makes a mistake, it'd be a lot easier for a lot of people.
Is it understood that people will perhaps every now and then misgender or make a mistake?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it's a part of life if you're trans. Like I feel like obviously every trans person is gonna experience it to a different degree. But I feel like a lot of trans people, especially when they're first coming out and everything, like it's expected. Like when I came out, at least for me, I know that I expected to happen. And I think I went in with that expectation and I came out happier because I had that idea that I know it was going to happen and it happened less. So I came out of it like not disappointed. Like I was like, okay, I'm fine with this. I know it's going to happen. Let's just move on.
And Cam, what would you say about that?
I think that something that's really important for me that just makes my day better in my trans life is I just don't understand why people feel the need to ask trans people very personal questions without even ever meeting them. Like I feel like it's like an instance where if I walk out of the bathroom and someone has an ignorant comment to make or asks me a question like, oh, like what's in your pants kind of thing. It's like, I don't understand why you feel like you can just ask me that if you don't know who I am. Like one, it's not your business. Like I feel like when people ask those kinds of questions, it makes it feel like, very odd and like out of place, because it's not like you would see a normal person on the street and be like, what's in your pants? It makes you feel like kind of a freak and it's not nice. Because when someone hears that, like anybody in the hallway or anyone outside hears that, they're all going to look at you because that's a question you don't hear come out of someone's mouth very often. And if it's directed at you, you're going to feel out of place. And I feel like asking trans people very personal questions out of the blue is kind of like very ignorant, but I can also understand that some people don't fully understand trans people yet. But I also think in regards to that, there's ways to understand trans people.
And so that's, gosh, Cam, you're in my brain. You're in my brain. So like that takes me right to there probably are a lot of people who are still learning.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a lot of educators in our system who are still learning and worried about making a mistake and worried about saying something wrong or worried about being offensive. And so maybe they deal with that in their own ways by just not saying anything at all or avoiding it, or I don't know. I can't say how people deal with that, but I guess I'm interested, Julie, as an educator, if you can sort of share, what do we do? What do we do? How do we help people who need to know more, want to know more? Yeah, what do you think about that?
So that brings up a lot. I think one of the big things to know is that just because a person is queer does not make them an expert in LGBTQ plus issues. They're not an encyclopedia, so you can't just pick the token gay kid in your class and assume that they know everything, or the token gay staff member who's going to then teach the whole staff about how to be inclusive in your classroom. And that's the same thing that can go for any type of a marginalized group. And so I think it's really important to show that you're willing to support your students and that you want to support them, is going out and doing some preliminary research on what books are there that are out there, what websites can I go to, and things along those lines. We do have, like in Thames Valley, we have the Culture for Learning team who provides some excellent resources for professional development. So maybe getting in touch with one of the learning coordinators just to find out where you can find and access more information is a great starting point for you to take, kind of jump off and take the lead. So taking that initiative on educating yourself and not relying on others that are in the community to educate you is a great way to show that you're willing to support them and be inclusive. And then once you've kind of had that initial research, then go and ask those questions that you might be afraid to ask. Know that you're going to make mistakes. We always encourage our students in the classroom to try things that are new, to step out of the box, that making mistakes is all about learning. You learn from your mistakes. So as Maya Angelou says, I know we talked about this previously, but do your best until you know better. And once you know better, do better. And so we're continually learning and continually growing. And that's the best advice that I can give for anyone looking to support any of their students.
So seek information. Like if you don't understand, seek information, and then ask questions, perhaps, if you have questions, but take the initiative and seek information. Yeah.
Exactly. Educate yourself.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Matt and Kim, I'm wondering what your thoughts are. Like you talk about the GSAs having such a significant impact on sort of the sense of social connectedness in a school, as well as sort of mental health and well-being, and how that supports LGBTQ plus kids in this time of school closures, where we haven't had that same access to each other and sometimes the people that help us through. I'm wondering how are you supporting each other? How are you supporting your community? How is your community supporting each other without that connection to, for example, GSAs in schools?
I think that like our generation, I feel like we're very good at social networking. So we've all pretty much stayed in touch, like all my friends who have gone to GSA with me. But I feel like there are so many internet resources that it really it would be much different if we didn't have access to the internet. Like there's so many different different media sources that can help people. Like there's YouTube if people want more education on a certain topic or just want to watch some of their favorite YouTubers who are in the LGBT community. There's Snapchat where you can still talk to your friends, TikTok, Instagram. Like there's so many networks that I think that it's made the transition barely easy for a lot of kids our age, other than obviously like we're going to miss our friends, seeing them in person, but we've still been able to stay in contact, which is really nice.
Okay. Okay. Kim, would you agree with that?
I feel like with me, I'm always one of the people that's like leaving you on red and never texts you back on time, and
You're that
have
guy.
really bad luck with like texting people back because I get so overwhelmed
Yes.
texting me. I'm like, I don't know how to keep up with this because I just don't use my phone that often. Like, to be honest, I'm not on my phone as frequently as I think I am. So it's
Right.
like, for me, it's kind of been like the only people I really keep up with in my day to day, my best friends and my family, and that's about it. So a lot of my community, I am watching them like go out on social media and do a lot of things on social media, and people do like to watch. I feel like the LGBT community has a lot of really good YouTubers that people do like latch onto, which is a good thing, like Matt said. But I feel like for me, a lot of the things I've been doing are more for my own the well-being during this weird, odd, strange time of Corona, and and trying to reach out to the others in my small little community of friends. Because I feel like that's all I can do right now.
I think it's the best we all can do, actually. Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like we all just need to do the best we can right now, because expectations shouldn't be that high for any of us.
Yeah.
Because of the situation.
Yeah. Can I jump in as well,
Yeah.
Kelly?
Yeah.
Just, I know when you mentioned at the beginning is the whole idea of social belonging and access to economic resources that are super important for students for their mental health and well-being. And that's where we need to also, as educators, be aware that there are students who don't have access to these means through social media, through texting, Snapchat, to connect with their friends, where the in-person GSA support was so vital to their social inclusion, that mental health piece. And now with no access to that social piece, that's completely cut off because maybe they don't have access to the internet or the texting, like I mentioned, their mental health is really struggling right now. And so for educators to be sure to reach out and make those connections with all of their students via phone or however, whatever means it is, it's extra important right now that they're able to do that.
And the power of that connection is the human connection at a time when we don't have a lot of human connection is huge. Yeah. So if I just kind of go back to that beginning, like you just said, and recap the three social determinants of mental health: freedom from discrimination and violence, and the power that schools have to impact that. The powers that schools and educators, administrators have to support LGBTQ plus students in protecting you from discrimination and violence, and making sure that our schools are safe for you. Social inclusion, how we include you with GSAs are important, but just in the classroom environment, in the hallways, in day-to-day existence in a school building, how we can acknowledge, recognize, and include you in all aspects of school, and your identity in all aspects of school. So schools have such a huge impact on your experience of feeling mentally well, and of your well-being. So would you agree? Like, that's just sort of me off the top of my head, but would you agree? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Glad you don't disagree. Excellent. So I'm just sort of thinking about, like, we've talked about sort of rights, we've talked about inequities, we've talked about what schools can do, and I'm coming right back to where we started around this concept of May 17th and the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Transphobia is also a bit of a celebration as well. And I look at the three of you, and what comes to my head is, what do you recognize about yourselves that needs to be celebrated? Because yeah, I have so many things that I would like to say to all three of you to celebrate you. I truly do. I feel so honored to be a part of this. But what would you like, Cam? How do you celebrate yourself?
I feel like for me, celebrating myself is just taking time to do what I want to do and showing people who like I truly am without any barriers, because I shouldn't have to put any barriers on myself. It's already 2020, and we should be just accepting of everyone and everyone's identities and everyone's everything. And I think that for me, celebrating myself, I take pride in a lot of my music stuff. So I feel like I play music and do what I love to do and express my thoughts and feelings about like May 17th and things like that in that kind of form for me, because that's what is important. That's the way I express my thoughts. So I feel like that's the best way to celebrate myself and things for me that are going well in my progress and how far I've come in my transition, things like that. For me, just translate into my everyday life, the things I love.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks, Kim. Matt, what does Matt do to celebrate Matt?
I'd probably say like sharing my story is honestly one of the best ways that I can celebrate myself, because I'm proud of my story. I feel like I've dealt with a lot of things that not many people would have to deal with in a lifetime, especially since I'm not like super old. But yeah, but I feel like every time I share my story, I become more comfortable with my identity, and I feel like not only is it celebrating myself that I can share this story, but that it helps other people to understand the struggles that they wouldn't be able to understand if I didn't share.
And Julie, what does let's celebrate Julie. What does Julie do to celebrate Julie?
Anyone who knows me knows I celebrate myself every single day. I don't need a day to celebrate me. But I like, it's not necessarily a celebration of myself, but just being true to myself every day is the way that I celebrate. And as an educator, being out to my students and letting them know a bit about my personal life, I think is incredibly important for any educator who's part of the LGBTQ plus community, to express yourself and share that with your students so that they are able to see themselves in the classroom, see themselves in you. I've had letters from students expressing like, you showed me that my parents and what they say at home around the dinner table is completely wrong, and that I should be true to myself and that I am going to be successful one day. So being a positive role model to allow youth to celebrate who they are and be true to themselves, I think is a roundabout way that I celebrate myself.
Based on everything that we've talked about, I'm left with this thought. All of the things that you need to think about, all of the things that you sort of need to deal with every day to just kind of exist and live your life. What comes to mind is that it would make complete sense to me if when you got the email saying, hey, do you want to do coffee with Kelly? And it would make complete sense to me if you were like, why would I want to talk to the entire Twitter universe or YouTube universe and make myself vulnerable, like the vulnerability for all of you to agree to speak your truth and to speak about who you are, it lands on me incredibly powerfully. And my last thought is that there's so much courage in your vulnerability. There is, like, you can't have courage without vulnerability, and there's so much courage and vulnerability in what you've done today. And I guess, Matt, you spoke about that a little bit about like sharing your story, and what, like, just as a last thought, Like, what inspires you to be this vulnerable? Because it would make sense if you didn't want to be.
Yeah.
So, and not everybody would, and that's okay too. But what inspires you to be vulnerable like you are?
I feel like I can picture my younger self like listening to me, and then I can see that in other kids who are going through kind of the same thing that I did, and just being that kind of voice to another kid, like just letting them know that like what you're feeling is completely normal. Like don't let anybody tell you anything different, and not to come out when other people want you to, but when you feel comfortable, and take things at your own pace and just be more comfortable with yourself. Because I feel like that was like an important lesson for me, and I didn't really have someone who could talk like that, so I got most of my information from the internet. But like I feel like if I can help another kid go through what I already went through and make their life a little bit easier, I feel like what I've done, like it's complete. Like I feel like successful in sharing my story.
And I have no doubt that other students will watch this, and I have no doubt that you will be successful in being inspiring to others. And Cam, what inspires your vulnerability? Like, what inspires you to share, like, to this degree? It's so courageous.
I feel like, I mean, a lot of the things that I've experienced is something that I wouldn't want other kids to have to go through. I wouldn't want other kids to have to go home at lunchtime so that they could use the bathroom. I wouldn't want other kids to have to walk down the hallways and be called slurs more than they have to, you know what I mean? Like more than they experience, because I've been in a position where things have been bad and you hear things in the hallway, you're looking behind your back all the time. Like you're in a situation where you don't know if like people are going to let you do things that you should be allowed to do, as simple as use the washroom, like we said earlier. But we're allowed to know our rights. We're allowed to say when things that are happening are wrong to us. We're allowed to stand up for ourselves. Like, and telling my story, like Matt said, is another thing that I just want someone else to be able to hear and not have to go through everything that I did. Kind of skip the bad parts and go on with their transition in their life and their coming out or whatever they are doing with themselves, because everyone needs a place to be themselves, and even hearing someone else's words on the topic is enough to make somebody feel like they have a place.
Well, that's I'm almost speechless. I'm not. I really like it. Really, it brings some emotion for me, and it's really, really powerful to be in the presence of two young men who are who've taken on this incredibly important role of being inspiring in service of the well-being of other kids and other youth. And so I think that's absolutely phenomenal. And I thank you all for being a part of this conversation. I thank you all for being you fully and completely. And I think everybody that listens to this will be so inspired and so grateful for your vulnerability, your courage, your honesty, and your humanity. So thank you to all three of you. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it. And happy May 17th.
Same to you. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome, guys. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.